Shall we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just jump on in.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, well, we'll just introduce ourselves real quickly. Um, so I'm Melissa Stringer. I am an LPC, licensed professional counselor based out of Texas. And I'll hand it over to you, Diana. I won't talk too much about myself, just other than what they need to know.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm Diana Garcia. I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in Florida. And so we'll just keep it basic.
Yeah,
And
let's
thank
keep it
you.
basic.
I see a Jean Kelly and a Immigrant Ren. Imago is the logo I see. But thank you
Yes,
for joining
thank you.
us.
Absolutely.
All right. So I think why don't we just start off with why we decided to even do this six-part series, Melissa?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're right. Like we said in our last live, we were like the hugest ACT fangirls.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's some that's bigger than us, but we're pretty big ACT fangirls.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so yeah, we were just all about spreading the love and spreading the word about acceptance and commitment therapy, which is built off the psychological flexibility model. Um, and just explaining these six core processes, which are also skills that we can put into our daily life, to
Yeah.
help us live more meaningful, vital, more in tune with our values types of lives. So last time we did diffusion, and
Hmm.
today it's going to be acceptance.
Yeah.
um, Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you kind of hit it on the nail. We both really are practicers. We both practice acceptance and commitment therapy ACT for short. And because of that, and we see so much benefit both professionally and personally, because I think to practice ACT professionally means to practice ACT personally and trying to really use these skills. And so we were trying to brainstorm how are ways that we could kind of share these skills with anybody, anyone who's joining us, whether you're in counseling, not in counseling, just
Hmm.
to start to apply to your life. And I think the one thought that comes to mind is, when we're talking about ACT, really the main goal and the goal with all these six skills that we're going to talk about, it's this really big concept that's called psychological flexibility,
Right.
which it's just this person, it's really just learning how to be really flexible when life throws you curveballs
Hmm.
or when there's a lot of stuff internally going on and how you can just adjust flexibly to those
Right.
to those things with the
Yeah.
goal of having a sense of moving forward towards what's important to you, right? And we use a lot of the concepts of values and so forth. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So the reason we're even,
Hmm.
talking about these six different skills is in order for you to learn to be a little bit more flexible.
Absolutely. I like to think about it like as mental yoga.
Yeah.
Like when you go to yoga, right, we
Yeah.
learn how to make our bodies more flexible so that maybe they're more functional, like while we're doing our daily physical task, and maybe they relieve chronic pain and things like that. We can kind of sort of learn to do the same things with our minds, be able to expand and have more of a capacity to hold stress and build more resilience and flexibility. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that kind of yoga for your mind.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So just real quickly before we jump into our definition of acceptance, just wanted to mention that we do have the other, our very first live that we did last time that was on diffusion. Real quickly, diffusion is just it's the process of stepping back from our difficult thoughts and feelings, getting untangled from them, getting unhooked from them. We provided some tools for how you can do that, some metaphors that help to kind of conceptualize what it means. So you can go back and check on that one if you wanted to watch that, and in addition to this one. So just wanted to let everybody know that that's out there if you want to check it out.
Yeah, and our hope is that you can watch each of these videos independently, but also that they kind of build on each other because as you'll see
Mhm.
with these different skills, they kind of work breaking them down one at a time, but they're really all interconnected. So
Totally.
even well, you'll see that in one of today's exercises, we're going to kind of use some skills from last week. And so just kind of recognizing that each can work on its own, but it's really kind of, I guess in yoga, when you're doing just a whole sequence, right? You just start with one move and then you transition to the next one.
Right, exactly. I like the way you described that. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll just kind of jump in with our definition of acceptance because we know I mean, I think even for you and I, like if we're being real, like when we first discovered acceptance and commitment therapy, there was maybe an initial turnoff around the word acceptance. Like, well, I don't know. That sounds like that might be a hard sell for my clients,
Yeah.
because it is for us. Like when we hear the word accept, I think in our culture, it's just like, why? Why would I have to accept something that feels uncomfortable? Like, what's even the purpose of that? We're very geared towards happy thoughts and happy attitudes and put on a good, happy face about everything. So it's, it can rub us the wrong way because of the way that we've been conditioned through culture, and maybe just some misunderstandings about the term. But the term literally means just embracing certain aspects of your reality that are unchangeable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you said that even, maybe we had an initial reaction. I know I did because I think, and I think a lot with ACT, it goes a little bit contrary to even what we learned sometimes in that, no, we should really focus on changing all these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. And so to kind of shift in towards acceptance, I think sometimes the reaction is like, you're just telling me like to give up, or there's no control that I have over these uncomfortable feelings or thoughts or internal kind of physical sensations. And so it would make sense as an internal, like, yeah, of course I'm going to resist that concept. And I think, like you said, because our culture so heavily talks about, being positive and staying happy. And if you're not doing that, it's really easy to fall into this trap of like, something's wrong, right? Something's wrong with you because you haven't figured out the way not to be happy all the time.
Right. Or if I'm feeling uncomfortable, if I'm struggling with something, I'm weak, right? It's just like some sort of, I'm broken. There's something internally wrong with me. And so, right, this idea of acceptance is just completely counterintuitive to what we're taught, right? To kind of what, right, even the most, simple organisms on the planet, right? When they feel discomfort, they recoil, right?
It's a natural reaction.
It's a natural reaction. And right. And what we're kind of trying to convey today, I think, is that we're not just like acceptance freaks, like this is the way that, through life, you must accept everything. And that's the way. And, there's times where acceptance doesn't work and you should avoid, and so we're going to kind of talk about when acceptance is workable for your life and when acceptance is not workable for your life.
Yeah, and I love that point because we're not saying accept things that aren't working for you, right? So there's certain things that if you choose to resist them, but it's working for you, it's not really causing you any harm or in any way, shape, or form impeding in your values, then okay, then that it is what it is, right? Because we all have moments of avoidance, right? I'm sure I know I come home at times and definitely binge watch way longer than I should, right? And if I'm doing that every day, maybe that's a problem, but if I'm doing that ever so often, then it's not really a problem. So I think I love that point of, we're not saying like accept everything, right? Like kind of this unicorn and butterflies, like accept every single thing, and I don't think that's realistic.
No, not at all. Not at all. Like an over-reliance, like you said, on avoidance can backfire on you, and an over-reliance on acceptance can backfire on you. Both of them can. You just have to look at each situation and determine what's best for that situation. Acceptance is merely a tool that we're sharing that, here, try this one on, experiment with this and see if this is the right tool for this situation for you. When all else has failed, right? When avoidance has failed in this situation, let's try and see what acceptance can do for you here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of mentioned a little bit of definition in terms of with acceptance, it's really accepting things that are outside of our control. And so maybe because it goes a little bit counterintuitive to what our culture tells us is out of our control, what do you mean when you say like things that are outside of our control?
Right. I mean, gosh, right. Turn on the news, right? Like COVID, right? Natural disasters of all types, fires, hurricanes, all of these things, injuries that we sustain, right? All of these things that are out of our control, right? Like if I were to be like, no, just accept that you're in a hurricane and, I want you to go outside and get in touch with other aspects of your experience, like the wind on your face, like, no, that's ridiculous, like avoid, run, save your life, preserve your life, keep yourself safe. So, those are some extreme examples, but those are some like in abusive relationships. Don't accept that. Don't, no, that's avoid
Yeah.
that, get away from that, right?
Yeah.
So those are just some instances in which, we would say, no, acceptance doesn't work here for you, or, people taking advantage of you or stepping over your boundaries in some way, that's not where you need to practice acceptance for most people.
Yeah. And I think this other part, because I think a lot of times people think that they have a lot of control over some automatic thoughts or feelings that show up, right? And
Right.
so there's a sense of, well, I have these uncomfortable, painful thoughts and feelings, so I have to change them or I can't have them, right? So, or I
Yeah.
have to avoid them or resist them. So I think when we're also talking about acceptance here, we also want to talk about just kind of stepping back and recognizing that we don't have control or as much control as we want to believe over our thoughts and feelings. And
Yeah.
if sometimes when our clients are like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, think about it. Like,
Yeah.
how long have you had or dealt with some of these painful thoughts? And for
Hmm.
a lot of my clients, for myself included, I can name, early childhood, I've dealt with some painful thoughts or painful feelings, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and not that we don't, obviously we do things in the moment that can help and so forth, but these thoughts and feelings come up, right? So we
Right.
can't just turn them off like we can turn off the light switch. And so when we're
Yeah.
talking about acceptance here today, we're also talking a little bit about some of those uncomfortable and painful thoughts and feelings
Hmm.
that if you accepted them, right, because you don't have control over them, then what
Yeah.
would change, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's an alternative to pushing against or trying to modify something that historically that strategy has not worked for you,
Yeah.
So it's an alternative to explore to see, yeah, like you said, what could happen in my life? How could I open up? And what kind of impact could that have on my life if I were to be able to kind of at least dip my toe in the process of acceptance?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of brings me to this kind of first exercise we wanted to talk a little bit about today. So for whoever's watching, whether that's live or replay, right? So there's this one exercise that actually pretty cool. So, well, it might not start off pretty cool because I'm going to encourage everyone to, and Melissa and myself as well included, to really kind of think of a challenging issue that comes to mind. And so, and not necessarily something on the outside, like, so for instance, like a concern about a job stressor or financial, right? Not something outside of you, but something
Mhm.
challenging internally, right? So either a painful
Mhm.
thought or feeling something that you just, gosh, when it comes up, it feels really difficult, right? So,
Yeah.
everyone can just take a moment and think about that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so when we're thinking about this painful experience that shows up for us, and so now I want you to imagine, so let's say I'm a sculptor, right? And I'm not, I'm not really artistic, but let's say I am a sculptor and I could sculpt, I can tell you, okay, if you could tell me and then I can sculpt this for you with your body, your whole full body, I'm doing a sculpture. What would it look like if you were, dealing with this challenging issue that you just thought about? And if you had to show me with your body, like your full body, how would you show me when you're at your worst dealing with this issue, right? When you're really
Mhm.
kind of struggling with it, resisting it, whatever that looks like for you, this painful issue shows up. How would you show me with your body? And so Melissa and I are both going
Yep.
to show our like what it is for ourselves. And if you're watching, I'd actually encourage you as well to just kind of do what that looks like with your body.
Right.
So there we go. One,
Here we go.
two,
Let's jump in.
3. So
Maybe something like that.
right. And so,
Mhm.
I want you guys, whoever's watching live or recorded, to just really kind of take a moment and notice what that's like in your body, right? And even if you have your phone handy, maybe take a picture, right? Kind of just note and take a picture of what that's like. Okay, so that was one experience. Now same challenging issue. Now I want you to think about same thing. I'm still a sculptor. How would you show me what it's like to deal with this issue, still painful issue, but when you're at your best, when you feel like, gosh, I nailed it, I dealt with that, really in line with my values, I feel proud of how I handled this really painful issue. What would that look like if you were to show me with your body? Okay, so again, once again, 1, 2, 3. Go ahead. I don't know if you can see, but
I know. I've got my palms up.
oh, me too.
And I'm sitting up straight. I'm pulling my shoulders back. I've got my head held up high.
Okay.
My feet
Yeah.
touching the ground. How about you?
Yeah, it's funny. And we didn't script this, but
No.
for me, it's more kind of like open chested in terms of like I'm being really open. My palms are up in terms of not like resisting as much. I'm not fighting it. And so I'm sitting up straight, but like kind of just really being open to my experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, and whoever's following along, so kind of note that, and again, maybe take a picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the piece is, you know, with this experience, I wonder, you know, it's interesting, and we really didn't script this, but what makes, you know, whoever's watching think that we had very similar experiences, that when we are dealing with this issue, a challenging issue that shows up, but then we both have a reaction of almost kind of, like for me, it was closing off. That's how I would describe mine.
Constricted.
Yeah. Right. And when I've done this similar exercise with a lot of different clients, it's been kind of a very similar experience where clients show some type of like closing off, kind of resisting. And so it's just really interesting that there seems to be like a universal experience that when we're at our worst, there's some, and we're showing just with our body, there's some type of resistance to what's happening. Whereas in contrast, when, you know, what was your experience like, Melissa, when it was you dealing with it at your best?
Yeah, at my best, it was like I was, you know, sitting up straight, my feet were planted into the floor, my palms were up, my shoulders were back, my head was held high, you know, just like, okay, I've got this, I can handle this. I'm creating a frame that can absorb this.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah,
or like a belief. There's a belief behind the frame that I can absorb this, I can stand this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, it's this sense of like I'm open to the internal experience, right? So that's why I was really kind of like I'm open to whatever uncomfortable experience is, right? And I kind of will hold myself through it, right? Like kind of really maintain myself. And so same thing, I've done this exercise, I think both of us, with our clients, and there seems to be this very similar kind of experience. And this is a good way for anyone who's watching to really think about, when you're dealing with an experience, kind of asking yourself, am I having this response, or am I having this response? And I'm trying to make sure you can see me in my frame.
Right.
Just to kind of cue you to notice, are you kind of really resisting something? Right. Or are you really in this space of being, you know, even if it's just dipping your toe in this sense of acceptance? Does that kind of make sense?
It does to me. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the first time I read about this, and I think it was Stephen Hayes that had conducted this research and did these interviews across lots of different cultures and different backgrounds. And what he was finding was that it was pretty universal. Like when he asked people, show me you at your best handling a challenge and you at your worst handling a challenge, it was pretty across the board. People gave the same sort of intuitive response. It's like our bodies know sometimes what our mind forgets. And I think he was trying to kind of make that point. We can get so lost up here in the, you know, the mentalizing and the thinking about and the storytelling, and we can forget what type of posture or stance is actually most workable, you know, or is very workable in a lot of these really hard situations we find ourselves in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if anyone that actually did this live or is going to replay later, we'd really like if you could actually just tag us on these pictures, because we want to see, you know, is it universal? Let's do our own little experiment, right?
our own research.
Yeah. You know, just to see, you know, what was your experience, or, you know, if you don't feel comfortable sharing your picture, just, you know, what was your experience, or generally describing, you know, what your posture was, right? Did you notice of any big differences or not, right? And I want to be clear, with any exercise that we talk about, there is no like wrong or right way to do it, right? It's just your experience and trying to be curious to like, okay, what's going on there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was like that's one kind of way that when we're talking about acceptance, just kind of very physical way to help. And I see someone put a big difference. Oh, okay. That's cool. So you did notice a big difference in how your body responds and how you could show that. So I think similar to Melissa and myself. And so that's kind of one really cool way to, you guys can practice and know that and just kind of have that in the back of your mind.
Yeah,
Another one, and this one might not be as accessible, but there's this other really cool way to talk about acceptance. So it's this, if everyone can see, if anyone has ever seen this, this is what's called the Chinese finger trap, right?
Yeah.
So you might have seen this as a kid. I'm pretty sure I did. Although I don't know where or when, but I know I have.
Right. Party probably.
Sure. Yeah. It's like in the goodie bags. So when we think of a Chinese finger trap, so the whole point is you stick your two fingers through the Chinese finger trap. So what would be kind of the natural inclination? So the whole point is you're trying to get your fingers out of the Chinese finger trap. So the the instinct when I'm doing this is to automatically pull, right? So I'm like trying to pull my fingers out. That's just kind of natural reaction, right? But if you can see, the more I pull, and I don't know how well you can see, but the more I pull, the more it gets tighter, right? It doesn't help me get out. And so if we were just, first to kind of really acknowledge and recognize, so if we were to look at this in terms of acceptance, and that sometimes we get really caught or stuck with uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, right? Whether that's a feeling of anxiety, a feeling of grief, a feeling of sadness, a thought of not being good enough, that you're going to drop the ball, that someone's going to judge you, whatever the case is, right? These painful thoughts that might show up for us. And when we're in them, we feel really stuck and caught, right? Similar to the Chinese finger trap. And of course, the instinct is to pull, right? To try to push against that kind of pain and to try to really get yourself out of it, right? And similarly, like the more I pull, the more I get stuck, right? And the more I try to push against uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, usually it's the same reaction. I noticed that then we end up spending a lot more time and energy trying not to have the feeling, and a lot of behaviors that don't really help us, whether that's drinking, whether that's reacting impulsively, like I said, binging, whatever binging looks like for you, right? Whether that's Netflix, work, food, alcohol, whatever the case is, right?
Right.
And so just as much as, the natural inclination is maybe to try to avoid, and just like my natural inclination is to try to pull in this Chinese finger trap, what's really counterintuitive, the way to get out of it is to actually slowly push in. So to try to have this sense of acceptance, push in and do something counterintuitive, and then slowly, and let's make sure I can actually get out of this, get myself out of it, right? And so, but the big piece here is that with acceptance and with this Chinese finger trap, you actually have to do something that's so counterintuitive, right? And so even when we're talking about acceptance, it feels counterintuitive at times to accept, right? And so this is just one way to start to recognize and remind yourself, and even go purchase a Chinese finger trap when you're getting really stuck and caught by some painful thoughts and feelings.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what.
Sorry, no, that's my watch. You sometimes have to do things that are counterintuitive. So that's just a really cool way to sometimes talk about acceptance, and really, because acceptance doesn't really feel like the natural thing to do at times.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that one. That one made a big impact on me when I was first learning acceptance and commitment therapy. I was like, wow, that's so true. That makes so much sense. So yeah, I just love these metaphors that kind of, just help us really conceptualize what this, acceptance thing means, and what it means to struggle, and what it means to lean into struggle, and how we can apply that, in our daily life and challenges and situations and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we talked about doing like a little in the moment kind of experiential exercise, just as another way to demonstrate, like, what does acceptance look like as a process? Like, what does it look like as we're literally trying to walk through the steps, versus just talking about it, in this abstract sort of floaty way or metaphorical way? Like, show me the steps. Like, what does it actually look like? Right.
Yeah.
So let's just, let's play around with this. Again, this is completely unscripted, unrehearsed. I have no idea what Diana's going to say today. All we know is that I'm going to be the therapist and she's going to be the client. And we're just going to try to, show what this might look like if you wanted to practice it on your own, practice acceptance. So Diana, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to, if you're willing,
Sure.
if you're willing, to come into contact with some difficult thought or feeling. And once you've got it, I'll shut up for a minute if you need to, think about what that is, and you tell me when you've got it.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, you got it. Would you be willing or open to share what the content of that thought is?
Sure. So the thought that kind of came to mind was like, oh gosh, I am not an ACT expert, or I don't know enough to be doing these IG lives. So like this kind of imposter, like I'm an imposter, that kind of flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not competent.
Yeah.
I don't deserve to be here. I'm unsure if I should be here or not, kind of feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So all those kind of mix of like, oh, I'm gonna stumble, fall, like I don't know enough, I'm not good enough to do these lives and things like that.
Right. And so those are some of the thoughts. What are some of the accompanying feelings that come with that? How would you tease out just the emotional aspect of the experience?
So definitely a lot of kind of anxiety, some fear. So kind of like I can feel like even kind of the present moment of like as I'm talking about it, like the sense of like, oh, I can kind of feel that starting to really show up. So those would probably be the two. And then even a little bit of vulnerability of like, oh, I probably shouldn't be sharing this. Like,
Right.
the experts don't share this, but that part too. So some vulnerability, but also this like, resistance to like, I shouldn't share that.
Okay. Yeah. Completely relatable, a lot of the stuff that you're saying, and it makes perfect sense why you would be thinking that or feeling that way. So the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is either close your eyes or, just lower your eyes, whatever you're comfortable with. Just lower your gaze somewhere. Get your feet on the floor. Make sure they're touching the floor. And, I want you to think about what you've just told me and what you've just shared. And I just want you to notice your experience right now in this moment. I want you to kind of do a body scan and notice if you can feel that anywhere in your body. I know that you mentioned your heart a little bit, like in your chest. Tell me if there's anything else that you notice. Tension anywhere, throbbing, pulsing.
Yeah. So definitely kind of just like tension and tightness, I think just all over, like kind of mainly my kind of chest and stomach area. And kind of like I mentioned before, kind of my heart beating a little bit faster when I think about it or talk about it.
Okay.
Maybe a little breathlessness.
Okay, little breathlessness. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's some good noticing. So what I'd like you to do now is I would like you to take maybe 2 or 3 really deep breaths. And as you're taking these 2 or 3 deep breaths, I want you to imagine that you're just widening your capacity, like this body that's wrapped around these experiences that are happening. If you could picture your body stretching to accommodate this stuff, these sensations, these thoughts, these feelings, with each breath, I'd like you to just visualize that happening, making space for it, opening up to it. And if you could, whatever size that it feels like those thoughts or those feelings like take up in your body, if you could raise your hands up and show me, like just, hold your hands apart to show me how much space do you feel like that's taken up in your body. Okay. All right. And how much space, is that amount of space the same as the space before we started this and you started breathing? What was your experience, how that's shifted or changed?
I felt it actually expand a little bit.
Okay, it expanded a little bit. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good noticing. Okay. So here you are with all of these experiences. You're noticing that. We're acknowledging that. I'd like you to kind of push your feet into the floor a little bit. Wiggle your toes. Wiggle your fingers. And if the deep breathing helped, or if it felt nice, you can continue that, or you can just do whatever rate of breathing feels okay to you right now. And I'd like you to tell me maybe 2 things that you can hear.
I can hear my fan in the background and like some outside car noises.
Okay. All right. And so I want you to kind of go back into your body, into your internal experience, and I want you to check again. I want you to do that body scan again, and I just want you to scan for any areas of tension, any sensations at all, throbbing, pulsing, nausea, fluttering.
Not anymore.
Okay, you're not really detecting much right now?
No.
Okay. All right, so go ahead and give your toes a wiggle, give your fingers a wiggle, maybe straighten up, shift your posture, shift in your seat a little bit, and go ahead and open your eyes, and maybe find one object in your room and describe it to me briefly.
My water bottle, so it's white with a black cap. It's pretty big. It's taking up space on my desk.
Okay.
Has little grooves on it.
Okay. Very good. So are you describe your experience to me from the start of when we kind of brought the metaphorical snake in the room. We're like cranking up the volume. Okay, really think about it. Describe the feelings. Tell me what that kind of beginning, middle, end process for you. What was that like?
So the beginning, I think I was initially okay, just because even though like I was like, okay, I knew I was going to be a client per se, so I was like, okay. Although I think what I was surprised is as you started to do like the mindfulness and I started to really think about kind of what I was sharing, I did start to notice some of that validating, like, oh wait, no, there's a real vulnerability showing up, right? So it almost felt like even though I was prepared, I was like, it made it feel safer. Then I was like, oh no, now I'm in it. Now I'm feeling it. Now it's kind of, especially like I said, I could just really feel it in my chest and like with my heart beating a little bit faster. So I was noticing that and then I was like, okay, well, that's the point of this whole exercise, right? To notice that, right? Like, okay, I guess that was the whole point in trying to really just be open and vulnerable about that. And then as I was going through it, I don't know if it was a combination of like the body sculpture exercise. So when you were guiding me through kind of trying to expand, I also just had a very visual kind of like of myself expanding, of like trying to open up to that experience. And it might have been just because we did that exercise. So I still had that fresh of mind. So I was like, okay, expand into it, like be open into it. And so then that's where I was saying, I started to feel it go like kind of shrink a little bit. And I don't know if it was shrinking because I started to expand and it kind of, so I just got bigger and in comparison it got smaller.
Right. Cool way to think about it. Yeah.
But then as you just continued to ground me with like my feet and my hands and then I just kind of was able to shift, and for me it really started to dissipate. Like it started to, just to go away.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, and right, like this isn't what always happens, right? This is not what always happens. Sometimes it gets cranked up and, it can be hard. It can be really difficult. And so we'll just kind of break down like step by step, put it into steps. Like what did we just do here? So the first thing we did was, we evoked the uncomfortable thing, right? Like we pulled it up. We ask you, right? Most of the time, like if we need to practice acceptance or diffusion or something like that, we don't have to evoke. It's already there. It's already in the room. right? But just for the purposes of this exercise, we tried to pull it up. So it's already there, right? All we're really saying is acknowledge, notice, right? Acknowledge your experience and don't get hyper focused on just the thought. That's one part of your experience. That's just one part of your experience. We're saying, well, what else is going on here, right? We're saying, what's going on in your body? You know, what's going on as far as sensations go, and right, directing your attention to your behavior, right? We're connecting to a behavior, right? Like, what can you do when in the presence of this hard thought? Can you wiggle your fingers? Can you wiggle your toes? Can you take a deep breath? Can you physicalize it for me? Can you physicalize the emotion and show me with your hands how much space it takes up, right? So all these different ways of relating to an inner experience, that's not just about obsessing about the thought, right? And it helps you to kind of regain control over your body again, right? If I can sort of move my fingers and my toes, and that's a baby step, what else could I build on and do that are bigger behaviors, right? That I could do even more in the presence of the scary thing. Right. And then I just had you kind of re-engage with your environment, right? Like, describe something in your environment. Do you have the ability to do that in the presence of these uncomfortable things showing up? And you did, right? You did. You could still do it. So anything you'd like to add to that sort of process?
Yeah, well, I think, like we were clearly evoking it, we were asking it, but a lot of times, I'll tell anyone, it's really a good clue when you start noticing that your thoughts feel like they're getting bigger or louder, or they start spiraling, or a feeling just starts to feel really uncomfortable, right? Or even, if sometimes people feel like they're easier to track it with a feeling that starts to feel really difficult, or just a physical sensation. So kind of, I think the first clue and even starting to practice acceptance, and like Melissa said, a lot of times it's really present and evident, but if you're not sure, it's just really starting to clue into, like, and even starting to notice those different little facets, that's probably you're on the path to acceptance, right? That's kind of a big part of acceptance. And I think the other thought that kind of comes to mind a little bit with acceptance, it's really, I love, like you said, it's not necessarily just zooming in on the thought, because sometimes when we get really stuck in there, it's really starting to kind of almost zoom out and recognize that the thought is one component, the feeling is one component, the physical sensation is another one. So a lot of times I like to talk about, like, we're just holding all of them, right? It's not just one, right? But it's almost like if you think of a fruit basket, it's just that, the apple, right? Versus, the whole basket, you're just holding it all. And if you can kind of zoom out a little bit, right? Because sometimes when we get either focused or really caught up in a thought or a feeling, it almost feels like that becomes, and it's overwhelming, and it becomes all of us, right? And so that kind of acceptance and grounding helps to almost zoom out a little bit. And just as you saw Melissa guide me through, whether that's really clearly asking where you feel it in your body and describing it and tuning into that experience, right? And I want to throw out that this work is uncomfortable, right? And so,
I mean, it's exposure. We're doing exposure. Yeah,
exactly. And so I also want to throw out, and maybe because, I want to make sure that we're not making it seem like, oh gosh, I just had an easy experience. And that a lot of times can, like you mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that it's going to go away. And that's not the point. And I want to point that out as well, that the point of acceptance isn't to make the uncomfortable feelings go away. No. If it happens, that's a bonus.
Yeah,
right.
It's a bonus.
But that's not the point. It's more of, it's dropping into the experience and being open to it, because the more you resist it, and then whatever you do when you're resisting it ends up giving you more trouble, right? If that makes sense.
Yes.
And if it feels like we're portraying it as easy, it's not. It's really hard work even to drop into this, and it's a practice, right? So it's not like a one and done kind of deal, right? No. Even with the same stuff, right? Even with the same stuff that shows up. So it's a practice of still, every single time this thought shows up for me, I probably will have to practice and rumble with it and deal with it.
And just, like, to put a cherry on top, like to kind of tie it up, the tail end of this experience, like it might really play out in therapy, and what we're teaching our clients to take into their everyday lives is, okay, so you did all that, you were able to come and get into contact with all this difficult stuff. Now help me understand, what was that in the service of, right? So we'll just use you for a real time example. What is it in the service of for you to come into contact with, these really scary thoughts, like maybe I shouldn't be here, I might say something wrong, imposter syndrome stuff showing up, fear, anxiety, what is it that you would make space for that? What's the purpose of that for you, right? Just to kind of like, oh, and this is the motivation, or this is where I build my willingness, is because I'm really in touch with why this matters to me.
Yeah. And so I think for me, it's kind of different kind of values or reasons. I think it's, trying to be authentic and showing up as who I really am. But then also just the whole point in doing this is to really try to help and show people that, how we can apply these skills. And in order for me to do that, it's worth it, right? It's worth it for me to be uncomfortable. And I want to say that it really truly is uncomfortable.
It is truly uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. And so it's kind of this trade-off of like, but if it's in line of helping others, of teaching the skill, of normalizing it, of being human, right? Because I think that's the other piece. Like, we're both humans. We both struggle with things. And so if we can just show what that even looks like in the moment, then it's worth it. For me, it's worth this trade-off of being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you've got a strong why, if you're really in touch with the why, that's again another facet of acceptance, of your acceptance work. It's another piece to the puzzle, right? There's all the stuff that we showed and we demonstrated, the acknowledgement, the connecting with your body, the engaging with your environment. And do you have a strong why, right? There's just this continuous additive process, right? Like to acceptance. It's like, we can't subtract the thoughts and we can't subtract the feelings. So what else can we do with this? Well, we can expand and we can add things to it. And so these are just other pieces that we can add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that starts to kind of wrap up our talk today. I know we might have jam-packed it with a lot of different exercises, and we just really wanted to make sure that one or all of these kind of resonate and hit home. And then again, that you can just start to really clearly get a sense of how this would look like in your life and practicing it. And again, practicing it because it's a practice. You know, some days you practice it, some days you don't, and that's okay. Right. I always tell my clients there's no such thing as perfection, and that's not the goal or the aim, right? That's not realistic. So we just want to thank everyone for showing up, whether that's you popped in, you stayed for the whole thing, you're watching after, totally great, fine, whatever works for you. And then I think like last time Melissa had mentioned, if you guys want to stay in touch with us, you can either DM us, follow us on Instagram, and I think, how can they stay in touch with both of us? I know for me, again, Nurturing Minds Counseling here on Instagram. I also have a YouTube where I'm also posting these because they're a little bit longer. What about you, Melissa? How can people stay in touch with you?
So you can follow me at Connect and Reboot. Feel free to DM me any questions or comments or feedback, because I really truly want to know, like, we're trying to craft these lives to be as helpful and beneficial as possible for people. If it's feedback like give more experiential exercises or more metaphors or more real plays, kind of like what we did just kind of in the moment. We want to know. We want to do that. So yeah, I'm not super active on YouTube. I have a channel, but I'm not super active there. But so I would say mostly like through the DMs, through my account would be how to contact me. Okay,
great. Yeah. And absolutely, any feedback or any other, I know we're just saying ask, but any other kind of topics or anything else that you guys are like, oh, I wish you guys really would focus on this, whether it's from an ACT lens or whatnot, we're definitely open. We want to make, I think, for both of it's of service, right? We want to make sure that this is of service and value. So any feedback is welcome. And so this is the second one. So again, tune into go watch the first one, which is on Melissa's IG profile. This is the second one, and then we'll be doing the third one in about a month, and we'll let you guys know when that's coming out. Just stay tuned with our profiles, and we kind of announce it about a week or so prior.
Yeah, sounds good. And again, just thank you everybody who dropped in, even if for a couple of minutes. We so appreciate it and hope that you took something away from this. I see Gene Kelly won. He said, I really enjoyed this. That's awesome. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, we love it. Thank you. And so we hope everyone has a great weekend and a great, I guess, Labor Day weekend, since we're going into that, if you're watching us from the States.
Yeah. All right.
Alrighty.
Well, I'll see you later, Diana.
Yeah, bye, Melissa.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.